with Shelda Ravenville. Hey, Shelda. How's it going? All right. Well, Shelda and I have connected on social media and just become a fan of what you're doing. And so I would love to introduce you to some of my teacher friends who happen to be on here. And if you don't mind, go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us about yourself and perhaps a little bit of your teaching background.
Okay, thank you for having me, first and foremost, Melissa. So I actually got into the realm of education via an organization called Teach for America. So it is an American-based company that recruits students and graduates from universities to be placed in the classroom in the fall. So I didn't necessarily major in education in my undergraduate years. I was actually a psychology major. And I kind of stumbled into Teach for America. I say stumble because I didn't necessarily plan on being a teacher. So the program trained me, and so I started teaching in Houston, Texas. And I taught there for about 5 years. And then I moved back home to my hometown, which is where I am based right now in Miami, Florida. And where I am now teaching online. So I did make the transition from in-person teaching to online teaching after 9 years of teaching in the classroom, teaching basically from first graders to fourth graders, which is from 5 years old to about 11 years old. So all of that, I feel like it's, because I didn't necessarily plan on it, I kind of just tried to do it all on my own. So when I first started teaching, I really struggled. I was waking up early in the morning. I was the first one on my campus at 6 a.m. And I was the last one to leave. The janitors knew me. So, that happened constantly. And so it came to a point where I was just asking God, like, why is this really what you called me to do? It wasn't until for some reason, I never really went to God or sought him for assistance. You know, I never really merged the two, if that made sense. Back then, I kind of kept them separate. So I was just like, okay, God, I need help in my finances, or I know that you're here and you're watching over me, but I never really brought him into my world of teaching. And it wasn't until where it was just one random day where I remember I had a student that I just was wondering if I was doing enough. I was wondering if he was learning, and he was one of my special needs students that I was catering to, and I kind of felt that load on me, and I was just laying down in bed, and I remember my Bible was just right there, and I actually never opened it like during the week. So, like I was in that season back then.
Yeah, that season. We all know that season.
And I just remember just turning and just opening my Bible, and I remember it was in Isaiah 41, where it talked about just him being the helper of Israel. And I remember just feeling a sense of peace just by reading it. I felt comforted. And that marked the moment where I just never went back. Like, I was just like, right when I came home from work, I went straight there. Right before I started work, I made sure I opened my Bible. So it was kind of like a defining moment for me. I would say back then, in the season that I was in, which was, and I started young. I started teaching when I was about 21 years old. So right out of college, and I was adulting, if that makes sense. I was trying to learn how to be an adult and be responsible for like 30 kids. And yeah, there was a lot that was on my plate that I was trying to balance and manage. And I would say that because of that, it led me to start my Instagram account, which is called Faith Fueled Teaching. So yeah, that's kind of like a little bit of my background.
Oh my gosh. That's cool. Well, it's cool to see the I don't know, the evolution of it all too, because you're not planning on going into teaching. You're into teaching. You're dare I say, kind of drowning in teaching, like a lot of us can identify with. That was me my first year too, and then kind of figuring out like where's your anchor, and really holding on to that. So that's really cool. Now I gravitated toward your account because I was like, dang, she is walking out so much of this stuff that I feel like I'm walking out too. And then I'm looking at a lot of other teachers, and these other teachers are either want to try, or are, really struggling to do the same as what we're trying to do. And so it's this step that I want to ask. You have mentioned some things that are like practical steps for what you do to include your faith in your teaching. Now, none of us, you and I, are not currently teaching in a private Christian school. We're not teaching, Christian classes. We are not having Bible study. We're teachers on the ground teaching reading and writing and public speaking and stuff like that. So I would love to hear, what are some of the practical ways that you do that? Because it's not always easy, and there are lots of limits on where we should speak and whatnot. But I'd love to hear kind of what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, so I'm all about setting the temperature, setting the tone of my classroom. I'm all about building culture and community. So the culture and community that you build sets kind of your teaching atmosphere. So I actually posted and printed out the fruits of the Spirit on different little cards that I had, and I posted it around the walls of my classroom. Now, I didn't specifically say, okay, these are the fruits of the Spirit. It was just
Galatians. No.
Yeah. I put, I just highlighted it, and it was a reminder for me too that, okay, making sure that I'm leaning in and tapping into those fruits, that they are reflected in my classroom, and not specifically or blatantly saying, the word of the name of God and scripture and verses, because, we were limited in policies of public school teaching, but bringing just those little values that I can share with my students. When I was in the classroom, that really was the first step that I took to making sure I'm bridging the two. Now, for me personally, back then, I always had sticky notes that I put around my teacher corner, just making sure, little notes for me that says, okay, remember to put God first, or, oh, you're eating right now, make sure you're praying. I had little reminders around my area, just for me personally, that kept me okay, I'm about to plan this lesson. And then I see that sticky note, okay, all right, cool. Let me make sure I pray first. That was helpful to me back then. Nowadays, I don't necessarily have to, I'm not in that season where I need to do that, because it just, back then it helped.
It helped exactly. In you. Yeah. Those fruits do come out. They do grow.
Yeah, exactly. And one other thing that I loved doing in my online teaching, but I started in my classroom, is just having little morning meetings, little group huddles with my students, where we just talk about how we're feeling, how was our day or weekend, or how was what we eat for breakfast, like a check-in. And so usually sometimes I would have a question of the day, or how was your weekend? And some of the kids might ask, how was your weekend? I said, okay, my weekend was great. Usually on the weekends I go to church, And so I never shied away from mentioning that. I never elaborated. I just mentioned it. And usually that opens the door for either one or two students coming up to me during recess saying, I remember this one kid, he sat next to me during recess and was like, are you a Christian? And I was like, what? Excuse me? And I was like, why did you ask me that? He's like 7 years old asking me that. He goes, because the other day you said you went to church. And I said, oh, yes, that is true. Yes, I am a Christian. And he goes, yeah, me too. I was happy that you said that. And I was like, what? It was just mentioning a part of me because my faith is a part of me. It's who I am. And
I think that's so important. Teachers are whole people.
Right. Exactly. That's a part of you. It's a part of your identity, part of my identity. Yeah. And so I definitely do not I wouldn't shy away from that, but I don't really delve deep into it, but it's a part of who I am. It's like saying my age, my birthday. Oh, and and this is also a part of who I am. And just bringing that even into my online classroom as well, that moment that I can start the classroom just checking in and then we build that relationship is a way that I kind of brought in my faith into teaching as well.
Yeah, that's huge. That's huge. And I love that. And there are so many, I love that you started with yourself. You said, these things are reminders for me, the fruits of the Spirit up there so that I can lean into it too. Gosh, I love that. Yes, absolutely. Us first, get our hearts right. And then, look out, see how we can serve. But I also love that these are, shared values for kids who have no interest in setting foot in a church or hearing the name of God. But that there is, value in love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Those are all things that are common shared values. And so I love that you are including all of that in there. And I also think, obviously we're not praying in our classes. I didn't ask you about this before, but a lot of times, I used to do this in my first teaching job was in a trailer in a gifted middle school in Richmond, Virginia. I was in a trailer out back with 30 middle schoolers. Guess how that smelled? It was an interesting time in my life. But I was in that trailer, and it was the thing that I loved most about that was that it was so quiet in the morning because nobody was out there milling around outside, and I could pray over chairs. I could pray over desks. As online teachers, we don't have desks to pray over, but we have a Zoom screen. We have a waiting room. We have, enrollment lists. And so I think, and I'm not perfect at this by any means, but it's so easy to pop on and start scrolling before class or something like that. But take a second, put the phone down, 30 seconds before class starts, pray over that kid, pray over that family that is having a hard time. There's so much that I think that we can do that goes into, a prayer for that kid and sets the intention also for that class. So that's really cool. It's cool. All right. Well, so there's a lot of awesome things that we can do, but I think another part of teaching is the negative side, or the side that we don't love as much, like planning and feedback and perhaps pay. We want to be paid more or something. It helps to focus on the things that we're grateful for. So I wonder if you have a moment that you kind of look back and go, wow, thank you, God, for the privilege that it is to teach. It may not be the most exciting day in terms of stuff that you get to do professionally, but a moment with a student or a moment teaching with colleagues. Is there anything that sticks out to you that says, God, thank you so much that I get to teach?
Yes. I remember a moment in time. I believe this was my third year teaching, and it was in an area where it was rough. It was a rough area, meaning that my students faced a lot of challenges, and I just remember always waking up with the stresses of not just teaching, but also making sure I'm managing emotions and different situations that may come and arise in my classroom. And I remember this time where throughout that year, I had a student that kind of his behavior was very erratic. And so I remember that year was the year where every single morning I called out to God just to help me love on this student, because that's what I feel like he needed the most. And he stuck out to me for a number of reasons. But it wasn't until 2 years later where I saw this student at a Walmart. And mind you, I never go to Walmart. I try to avoid Walmart. I don't like going there. But for some reason, I went there. I don't even remember why I went to Walmart. But I went to that Walmart, and he was there with his mom. And in that season, I spoke a lot with mom, and she was kind of giving me a lot of pushback as well. And so it was kind of hard with the family. And I saw them and I was like, oh my goodness. It kind of like, I was just like, okay, let me just leave. But then I stopped and I was like, you know what, let me just go say hi. And I turned around and I went up to them. I said, hi. And she goes, oh my goodness, hi, how are you? So she ended up telling me that she recognized that she wasn't the easiest mom to work with at that moment, but that she was so grateful for me being so patient with him and so calm, even with her, that she was going through a lot. But, I still kept on persisting and being the best for my student. Just her saying that in that moment, I was just like, wow. That was that moment where I was like, this is why I am teaching. This is why I do what I do. This is, even when there's all this happening, all these struggles, like I was that light in that family's life, not just the student, but the mom too. Cause she was back then, it was her time being a single mom, and she was struggling. And it wasn't, that was like literally a highlight in my teaching career, because I really, that was the year that I cried a lot, during my planning time, just being honest. Because I was just trying to figure out what to do, calling out to God. But 2 years later, not even that year, 2 years later, it came back, and her just saying, thank you. I needed you in that moment. It was just... It was just a highlight.
There's so much going on underneath what we get to see.
Yes, exactly.
What a gift to get to see that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Oh, that's so cool. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Well, very cool. And I love, the idea of like, sometimes we do cry during our planning times. That happens. It's real. And there's a lot of, I guess, opportunity for us to cut corners, to say, hey, I'm going to check out of this. I'm going to say no to this. There's a place for saying no. However, I think another part for us who are Jesus followers is to say, hey, I'm going to do things with excellence. And so I want to call that out and say, hey, you're doing things with excellence. And that sounds like such a cool example of, pushing through and talking to families, going the extra mile when we're faced with a difficult student or a difficult family to work with. But this also applies to our employers. It applies to our coworkers. It applies to our lessons, going above and beyond and doing excellent work, and really looking for like flourishing of the city where we're teaching. Now for us online teachers, our city. So it's kind of, it's a cool perspective shift, I think, for us to get to, think about what we're putting out into the world. And so I know I love that. I count that as a huge privilege.
You just reminded me of something else I posted in my classroom. My pastor used to say this all the time. Excellence is the standard, not the goal. And I remember posting that up like, okay, this excellence is the standard. It's not a goal that we should reach, but should already be the standard. Yes. Do things in excellence.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, and, there are things that stick with us. Pastors speak into our lives. I used to work with a ministry called Young Life. And we used to say when we were serving at camps, this is week only for this kid. This may be week 4 for you working here, but this is week only for our students. This is class only. It may be their 23rd class with us, but it is class only with them because we want to really serve them with excellence and make sure that it's a good experience. So, okay. Well, Shelda, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. But I would love to hear if you have one bit of wisdom. You're so full of wisdom. If you have one bit of advice, encouragement, wisdom for teachers who are also believers out there who may feel like they're struggling in the season, what would you share with them?
I would share, document it, right? If you have a journal, write it down, write down your prayers, write down your thoughts. If you are a digital person, type it in your notes section, everything that you're going through each and every day. Because I say this because you wouldn't even realize little ways that God was working in your life until you go back to it. I have 4 or 5 filled journals from my years teaching. I go back to it and I'm just like, wow, this is what was going on during that time. This is what I can, like, I'm learning from myself back then. I'm applying different, I used to write scriptures down in my prayers and not used to, but like, I still do, but I'm saying like the scriptures and prayers that I wrote back then, I just go back in it and I'm just like, wow, I'm applying it now. You get to look back and see your growth and still apply it to this day and time. You're learning from yourself. Yeah. So document everything. So cool. Just record it. Your thoughts, your whatever you're feeling in that moment, write it down. Because one day you're going to go back and look back and like, wow, God really did a number in my life. Even though you didn't feel it. Oh my gosh. I didn't feel it back then.
Yeah. Well, maybe, Shelda, I'm thinking maybe those 4 or 5 journals are like a book perhaps in the future. Would you grace us with a book? I don't know. Just throwing that out there. But, this is something that I love that you mentioned. For those of you who are watching this, Shelda has a wonderful resource that she's put together. Do you want to describe this? I would say it's like a journal, devotional kind of teacher, encouraging devotional. Would you mind describing it a little bit? I'll link it in the description below.
Yes. Yeah,
could you tell us a little bit more about it?
Like a reflection journal that is based off of scriptures that have really guided and grounded me as a teacher teaching in schools. And so it's basically just to elicit different ways that you can apply and merge your love for God with teaching. And so it's kind of like a guide reflection journal that I'm excited to share and put out there.
Yeah. That's so cool. I love it. I'm planning on printing it out this afternoon. So thank you so much for putting that together. Again, I'll leave that link below in the description, you guys, and you can check out Shelda on Faith Fueled Learning, Faith Fueled Teaching. Yes. And those are on Instagram, correct? And as well as YouTube.
Definitely. Yes. Faith Fueled Learning, Faith Fueled Teaching. Yes.
Rockin'. All right. Well, Shelda, thank you so much for talking with us. I appreciate it. And I hope this was a blessing for anybody who's gotten to listen to it. And I'm so excited to see what you're working on next.